After finishing the dinner dishes and getting things ready for tomorrow, I called out to my husband, Jacob, and my stepdaughter, April, who were still on the living room sofa watching TV. "You two, it's already late. Time to go to bed." The clock had already passed midnight. I reminded them that they would regret it in the morning, but Jacob suddenly spoke up. "Well, tonight I promised April we'd watch a movie together. There are so many we want to see, right, April?" "Yay." April nodded in agreement with Jacob's words. "We have a theater room in our house, built for my movie-loving husband and daughter. It seems that, once again, they plan to watch a movie in there tonight. Well, aren't you two just the perfect pair?" "Yep, we sure are. It's like having a date night at home, isn't it?" I jokingly said, and Jacob replied with a playful tone. I left the living room with a casual reminder, "Don't overdo it." But the next day, while cleaning the theater room for the first time in a while, something caught my eye. Why is this here? I noticed a bath towel under the sofa. It wasn't something that would have naturally ended up there. It looked as though it had been shoved in. I decided to refold it, but when I opened the towel, my throat tightened with fear, and I ran out of the house. "What is this?" My name is Emma, 45 years old. I work as a dietary manager at a senior care facility. The job is demanding, but it's rewarding because I help support so many people's lives. I live with my husband, Jacob, a middle school teacher, and our daughter, April. However, April and I are not related by blood. April is my stepchild. Her biological mother passed away from illness shortly after April was born. Jacob and I met at a party. Maybe it's because of my profession, but I've always thought about my future and wanted to find someone I could grow old with and support each other. However, due to a chronic health condition, I can't have children. There are many men who want to start a family with kids, so I had trouble finding a partner back then. It was during this time that I met Jacob. Right from our first conversations, Jacob told me that he was a single father. His wife had passed away early, and since his daughter was still very young, he was looking for someone who would accept his child as well. When I heard that, I couldn't help but feel like it was a fateful encounter. Because of my condition, it's difficult for me to have children. But I've never disliked children. Quite the opposite. I was deeply saddened by my inability to have them. Jacob was honest and open about his situation, so I also shared that I couldn't bear children. Perhaps Jacob felt the same connection as I did. We exchanged contact information right away, and over time, we grew closer, steadily building a relationship. When we started to consider becoming a couple with marriage in mind, Jacob brought April to meet me for the first time. I can still vividly remember the moment I first met April. "Emma, this is my daughter, April." Little April clung to Jacob's legs, shyly peeking up at me. She was holding her favorite teddy bear in one hand, and it was the cutest thing. "Hello, April. My name is Emma. It's so nice to meet you." I crouched down to her eye level and greeted her cheerfully. April, nervous but trying her best, replied in a clear voice, "Hello, I'm April." As she spoke, a shy smile spread across her face. She quickly hid her face against Jacob's legs again, but in that brief moment, her smile made my heart skip a beat. She's so adorable. At the time, April was only 3 years old, still at an age where she needed a lot of care. I was thrilled to think that such a sweet child would become my daughter. At the same time, I couldn't help but feel overwhelming sadness for her biological mother, who didn't get the chance to see April grow up. April was still at an age where she needed her mom. I made a vow that day to make sure April would be happy in place of the mother she had lost. More than 10 years have passed since then, and now I think of April as if she were my own child. After marrying Jacob, April quickly warmed up to me. She must have felt lonely without a mother figure in her life. Now we are a happy, close-knit family, and anyone who sees us would say the same. April is now in middle school, excelling in both academics and athletics. I couldn't be more proud of her. She's the star player of her tennis club, achieving great results. and seems to be enjoying her school life to the fullest. Jacob also has experience in tennis, so I often see the two of them talking about this sport. While I'm proud of her dedication to tennis, there's one thing that worries me. Mom, I'm home. Welcome back, April. April's cheerful voice greeted me as she came home, and I went to meet her at the entrance, along with her school bag. She was carrying a large tennis bag on her back. I responded cheerfully to April's bright voice, but the next moment, I furrowed my brow. April's knees were covered in scrapes. Honestly, you've hurt yourself again. What if they leave scars? You need to be more careful. April often came home with injuries, too absorbed in her tennis practice. I know it might not be right to say this because she's a girl, but I can't help worrying when she keeps getting hurt like this. Then again, these scrapes are proof of how hard she's working at tennis. That thought makes it hard for me to scold her too harshly. I pressed a freshly washed towel to her sweaty face, and she smiled happily. Sorry, I just tripped a little. It's no big deal. Pushing yourself is good, but don't overdo it, okay? Okay. April let me wipe her sweat, smiling as I pampered her. Every time she shows me this sweet expression, I end up spoiling her, thinking she's just too adorable. Despite being at an age where she's entering adolescence, April doesn't resist the involvement of us, her parents, too much. That's true for Jacob as well. In fact, there are times when I think April might be closer to him than she is to me. Take the weekends, for example. Even though Jacob works hard during the week, he's up and about early in the morning, cheerfully calling to April, "April, it's time to go." "Okay. Mom, I'm going shopping with Dad today." "Oh, is that so? Yay, I really want to try this new drink." Jacob and April always go out somewhere on the weekends. It's not like they're excluding me. It's just that I'm more of an indoor person, while the two of them seem to go out together frequently. Unlike me, they're both into sports and more outdoor-oriented, but their trips usually revolve around shopping. They often visit popular character shops or go to buy desserts, dragging Jacob along. "So you're just taking advantage of him, then?" "Hey, Emma, don't say that. It makes me sad." I teased Jacob, and he shrugged his shoulders in response. "We'll get you something too, Mom, so look forward to it." While we were talking, April, already impatient, grabbed her bag and headed to the door. As Jacob followed her, I added playfully, "At least she doesn't hate you yet. She really loves me, you know. Soon, she'll ask not to have her laundry done with yours." Jacob responded with a vague smile, brushing off my joke. "Take care." Once they were gone, the house fell silent almost immediately. I listened to the sound of their car fade into the distance before letting out a deep sigh. Maybe there's something different when you're actually related by blood. The relationship between her and me isn't bad at all, but compared to Jacob, I feel like it lacks a certain closeness. I know both of them are considerate of the fact that I'm more of an indoor person, but there's still a subtle sense of exclusion, because they both share an interest in tennis. Their conversations often seem livelier when I'm not involved. I've thought about trying tennis myself, thinking it might change something, but then I remember how I've been terrible at sports since childhood, and I give up on the idea. One day, after finishing the dishes and preparing for the next day, I called out to Jacob and April, who were still lounging on the couch in the living room, watching TV. "It's already this late, you two. Time to go to bed." It was well past midnight. I knew they probably wanted to relax, but tomorrow was a weekday, and I reminded them that they would be the ones suffering for it. Jacob, however, suddenly spoke up. "No, we decided to watch a movie together tonight. There's a lot we want to see, right, April?" "Yay." April nodded in agreement with Jacob's words. Jacob has always been a movie lover. Even before we got married, the three of us would often go to the movies, and perhaps because of that, April had grown to love movies too. Sometimes, their weekend outings are not for shopping, but for watching films. Jacob even insisted on having quality sound when watching movies at home, so he bought his own speakers. He enjoys watching them at full volume, which is why our house even has a soundproofed theater room. Unfortunately, I'm not particularly interested in movies and know very little about them. Watching Jacob enjoy himself so much, I frowned. You've got work tomorrow, too, you know. Of course, I'll make sure it doesn't affect that, Jacob said with a chuckle, as if it were a given. I didn't particularly like that grin, but I couldn't entirely disagree with Jacob either. Jacob and April, both being athletes, were probably capable of managing their own health. After all, in sports, your body is your greatest asset. Still, I remembered April had a tennis tournament coming up. Staying up late for no reason didn't seem necessary, but I knew that when it came to moments like this, they wouldn't listen to me. You two make quite the pair. They had their shared hobbies, tennis and movies, that were just for the two of them. I hoped they would forgive me for sounding a bit cold. When I said that in a half-joking tone, Jacob replied in a playful voice, "Yay, we're close. It's like we're on a date at home, right?" Seeking approval from April, Jacob's words only heightened my irritation. Even though I knew it was childish, there are limits to how much reason can suppress emotions. I started to leave the living room, feeling increasingly frustrated. But just then, maybe so, April's response to Jacob sounded dark and downcast, and for some reason, it sent an unsettling chill through my chest. I turned around instinctively, and saw April looking at me. April. It felt as if she was trying to tell me something, but it was only for a few seconds. Before I knew it, April had returned to her usual bright smile. "It's nothing, Mom. Good night." Good night. Though I felt a sense of unease, I brushed it off as my imagination and went to bed first. The next day, just as they had said the night before, Jacob and April seemed to have stayed up all night watching movies, yet both of them left for work and school, as usual. If anything, they looked even more energetic than I did, despite me having had a full night's sleep. Are they really okay? Despite that, I couldn't help but worry a little. I went to work in the morning, and after returning home around 3 p.m., I decided to clean the theater room they had used the previous night. We don't use the room very often, so I tend to neglect cleaning it. Taking this chance, I thought I'd give it a thorough cleaning. I wiped down the furniture and then started vacuuming. I paid special attention to the small gaps, like under the furniture, to make sure I didn't miss any dust. As I was cleaning under the sofa, I noticed a towel had fallen there. Oh, why is this here? The sofa was placed right in front of the large screen. I don't use this room much, but this is where they usually sit to watch movies. I recalled how Jacob had been very particular about the backrest angle and whether the sofa would be comfortable for long periods when we bought it. I stopped vacuuming for a moment and pulled the towel out. It seemed to be a bath towel, quite large in size. I wondered how something like this could have ended up in the theater room. It wasn't the kind of thing that could just fall in here by accident. It looked as though it had been shoved under the sofa. Sighing, I began to fold the towel, but at that moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. What is this? There were red stains scattered across the towel. For a moment, my mind froze, unable to process what I was seeing. Because those stains, no matter how I looked at them, were blood stains. This wasn't just from wiping a small cut. The blood covered a large portion of the towel. What is going on? I rarely come into this room. Jacob and April are the only ones who regularly use it. A terrible sense of foreboding welled up inside me. Come to think of it, April had been getting hurt a lot recently. She had excuses, like tripping during tennis or accidentally hitting herself with the racket, but the injuries were happening far too often. And then the memory of her dark eyes from last night, just before I fell asleep, flashed through my mind. No way. Clutching the towel with trembling hands, I ran out of the house, barely able to keep myself from collapsing. April. I headed straight for April's school in a hurry. As I approached the school gate, I spotted April, holding her school bag and large sports bag as usual. Noticing my voice, April, who had been chatting with her friends, looked up with a delighted expression. "Mom, what's wrong?" She quickly said goodbye to her friends and came running toward me, and my heart swelled with affection. At the same time, seeing the visible scars on her knees and arms filled me with a burning anger. "Did you come to pick me up? I just finished club activities, so let's go home together." If something had really happened to her, I couldn't just let it go. I gently pushed April by the shoulder and led her to a shady spot away from the school gate, looking down at her bruised and battered body. "April, what's really going on?" April, noticing my unusual demeanor, looked at me with concern as I frowned with pain and worry. I struggled to calm my racing heart and lowered my voice. "It's fine if we go home together. But before that, I need you to tell me the truth." "What do you mean by the truth?" April tilted her head. I pressed my hand against my chest to steady the nervous pounding of my heart, looking directly at April. "Today, while cleaning the theater room, I found a blood-stained bath towel under the sofa." She gasped immediately. Her face paled, and she brought her trembling hand to her mouth. Lowering her gaze, she looked so pitiful that I gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "April, I'm always on your side. You're the most important person in the world to me. Please tell me what happened. Why was there blood on the towel? And why did you hide it? What really happened in the theater room?" After hearing my words, April remained silent for a long time. She seemed to be torn, unsure whether to tell me or not. But I stayed quiet, trusting that April would eventually open up to me. Finally, April slowly began to speak. "The truth is, I didn't watch a movie last night. I was practicing tennis with Dad. All those times we said we were going shopping or going to the movies, that was a lie. Dad's been training me in tennis, so it really was." April's desperate confession felt like the key to unlocking all the mysteries that had been puzzling me. Jacob was a tennis player, just like April, but their passion for tennis was on completely different levels. Jacob's obsession with tennis was beyond normal. Though he was a middle school teacher, Jacob also worked as an active tennis coach, showing just how much he loved the sport. No, it wasn't just love, it was more like an obsession. Apparently, he had once dreamed of becoming a professional tennis player. When the subject of our marriage came up once, "I married you, Emma, because you can cook meals suited for athletes," he jokingly said. That's how deeply Jacob's passion for tennis ran. But April wasn't like that. "April, you don't actually love tennis that much, do you?" "Yeah, I knew you could tell." She nodded, her head drooping. "That's right. Though she had the talent to perform well in tournaments, she didn't particularly love tennis. Of course, I know. You're my precious child. Besides, you and Jacob had that argument about it before, didn't you?" I remembered the day when she was still little, and there was a small argument about tennis. That day, Jacob had suggested that April join a tennis school. He brought home a flyer advertising tennis lessons from somewhere and showed it to April. "April, you have a gift. You could become a pro. It's not even a dream for you to go to the Olympics." Jacob grabbed her shoulders and passionately urged her, while I frowned slightly from the sidelines. It should be her decision, I thought. She liked physical activities, but I had the impression she preferred dancing or singing her heart out. And as expected, she shook her head. "But I like singing more than tennis. Tennis isn't fun at all." "What are you talking about? You have a gift that others don't, and you're wasting it," Jacob shouted at her, who had clearly stated her preference, as though scolding her. Seeing her shrink in fear, I couldn't help but step in. "Hold on, Jacob. Shouldn't it be her choice whether she plays tennis or not? It's her body that's doing the work. No matter how much you love tennis, forcing her is not right." I thought I was being perfectly reasonable, but Jacob turned on me with furious anger. "Emma, you don't understand how incredible her talent is. Maybe she does have talent, but it's up to her how she wants to use it, right?" "Well, that's true, but..." When I calmly reasoned with him, he bit his lip in frustration and fell silent. He seemed dissatisfied, but I wasn't going to let him force her into anything beyond that. Jacob looked like he had given up, but she seemed to remember that incident vividly, and when she entered middle school, she joined the tennis club. Of course, Jacob had strongly encouraged her to do so. April had started it reluctantly. He hadn't given up. I spoke in a low voice, recalling the intense discomfort and unease from that time. I regretted not standing my ground more firmly back then. After I joined the tennis club, Dad stopped saying much, but before big tournaments, I asked him for advice. Since then, Dad has been taking me to the courts, calling it special training. As she spoke, April began unwrapping the surgical tape she had on her palm. Her hand was covered in burst blisters, with blood seeping through the skin. That's awful. Trying to keep my hands from trembling, I gently took her hand, careful not to touch the wounds. Her palm was in such a painful state that it was hard to look at. Dad sometimes talks about going on a date. Right, well, that's usually a sign that he's about to start one of his training sessions. At first, I was happy because whenever I played tennis, Dad would get excited and praise me. But recently, it's just been painful and miserable. I've started to hate even stepping onto the tennis court, she said, her voice filled with a bitter self-mockery. I remembered that last night, when they were supposed to watch a movie, Jacob had used the word date as well. What had seemed like a harmless joke at the time now felt incredibly malicious. I wanted to tell you sooner, Mom, but Dad kept stopping me, saying things like, if you tell on me, I'll get arrested, or other kids won't be able to participate in the tournaments. So I've been lying all this time. I'm sorry. He had not only forced her daughter into tennis, but had also threatened her. April bit her lip, her voice faint as she apologized. Unable to bear it any longer, I pulled April into an embrace. It's not your fault, April. You don't need to apologize. I felt overwhelmed with regret for not noticing sooner. Her gaze last night had probably been a silent cry for help. Even if she hadn't realized it, I had been ignoring April's SOS signals all along. I'm the one who should apologize for not realizing sooner. You've been so strong, April. I will never let him do this again. When I said that with firm determination, April finally gave me a shy smile, perhaps because she was happy to be praised or simply relieved. Jacob probably didn't intend to go this far initially. Sports are all about physical strength. There's no point in it if the body is broken. Yet he pushed April into brutal training that made her bleed. It didn't make any sense. Jacob's genuine desire to support April had somehow morphed into an obsession with the sport itself. Even so, I had no intention of forgiving him for hurting her. April, we're going to my parents' home for now. Go pack your things. What? Right now? We quickly packed our belongings before Jacob came home and headed to my parents' place. According to April, during the lead-up to tournaments, Jacob's special training sessions would last late into the night, and they were quite frequent. I felt it was urgent to get April away from Jacob for the time being. Since I had explained the situation on the way, my parents welcomed us warmly. April, who had been so busy with tennis, seemed to genuinely enjoy reuniting with her grandparents. Even though there was no blood relation, my parents adored April, who was always so cheerful and sweet. But as the time drew closer to when Jacob would usually come home, April couldn't help but be on edge. However, the exhaustion from tennis and the mental fatigue from finally confessing her ordeal caught up with her, and she soon fell asleep. Leaving April in the care of my parents, I sat alone, contemplating what to do next when my smartphone started ringing. Of course, it was him calling. I took a deep breath to calm the storm of anger inside me before answering the phone. Hello, Emma. Where are you? Did something happen? April's not here either. It's the night before the tournament, and I don't know what she's up to this late. Jacob, while concerned about us, couldn't seem to let go of his obsession with tennis. That only fueled my anger further. I responded in a cold voice. Something happened, all right. April and I are at my parents' home now. What? Why? He sounded utterly confused. To answer his question, I spoke firmly. Last night's movie date was actually a training session, wasn't it? I heard him gasp on the other end of the line. His reaction mirrored April's earlier at school. And apparently, date is your code for starting one of your so-called training sessions. I also saw the towel under the sofa. You stuffed it there, didn't you? You've been faking shopping trips and piling on weekend training, making April bleed with your extreme practices. When I confronted him with everything April had told me, he hastily tried to cover it up. No, the towel is mine, but I just dropped it. I used it to wipe off a cut I got when I tripped over the side table. Jacob, have you seen the palm of April's dominant hand? It's red and swollen with burst blisters. I cut off his attempt to make excuses, leaving no room for him to argue. Don't think you can talk your way out of this. Finally realizing that his excuses were pointless, he fell silent. But in the next moment, he switched to his usual defiant tone. Emma, you don't understand. If April keeps this up, she'll definitely turn pro. She has incredible talent. I'm doing this for her sake. His stance seemed to be that he was doing it all for April. But how could something that she didn't want possibly be for her benefit? It was nothing more than his self-righteousness. Our argument escalated from there. If April doesn't want to play tennis, it's meaningless. And is it worth hurting her over? Sports aren't that easy. You don't understand because you've never played. But every professional athlete pushes through injuries like that. But April doesn't want to become a professional. Your entire premise is wrong. April's talent is something extraordinary, something most people would envy. I'm the only one who can help her realize that potential. If she's left to her own devices, she'll waste it all. Hearing those words pushed me to my limit. I recalled the painful sight of April's blistered hands at school. Don't talk to me about talent. Jacob was only thinking of himself. What he was doing was imposing his own desires on April. Enough already. The person who envies her the most is you, isn't it? Had Jacob been standing in front of me, I might have slammed my hand on the table or even slapped him in my fury. That's how intense my anger was. Her talent is hers. It's her life, not something for you or anyone else to control. April is not a substitute for your unfulfilled dreams. If he truly cared about April, there was no way he'd make her bleed in the name of training. I understood that Jacob had suffered from not being able to become a professional athlete himself, and that he still couldn't let go of that dream. But using April to fulfill the dreams he couldn't achieve was unacceptable. Our conversation was going nowhere, and Jacob showed no sign of remorse. He truly believed that what he was doing was in April's best interest. I couldn't deal with him any longer. I ended it decisively. Enough, I'm divorcing you. I'll take April with me. What? You can't just decide that. I had been thinking about it the entire time on the way to my parents' home. We had built what seemed to be a happy family, but in reality, it was only a facade, built on April's silent suffering. If Jacob couldn't let go of his obsession with tennis, then my only choice was to protect April. Even if we weren't related by blood, we were undeniably family. There's no way I'm leaving her with you. With those cold words, I ignored Jacob's protests and hung up the phone. After that, I went through with the divorce. True to form, Jacob didn't agree to it easily, and the situation escalated to a court battle. However, with April's testimony on our side, I was granted full custody. Not long after, it was revealed that Jacob had been subjecting his other students to similarly brutal training sessions, where they, too, were forced to endure injuries. The members of the tennis club Jacob had been coaching were in the same predicament as her. His excessive coaching methods as a middle school teacher became a major scandal, making headlines in the news and newspapers. Naturally, Jacob was fired, but even then, he continued to insist that he had done nothing wrong. Honestly, I never want to have anything to do with him again. Mom, I'm home. Welcome back, April. April's cheerful voice rang out from the entrance as she returned from her club activities. I headed to the door to greet her. There she was, standing with a smile, wearing her new school bag. Since the divorce, April and I had moved into a new home near my parents' house, and we were living a fresh, new life. With my parents nearby, April often visited them. Mom and Dad had embraced April as if she were their own grandchild, and April seemed to be completely comfortable, able to rely on them freely. She had joined the choir club at her new middle school. She remained as skilled as ever, quickly earning recognition for her talents. Perhaps because she made this decision for herself, April seemed more energetic than ever, even more than I had ever known, and that made me incredibly happy. Tomorrow, I get invited to hang out with some friends. Can I go? Tomorrow was the weekend. Now, she had the freedom to choose whatever she wanted, without any restrictions. Relieved to see her making friends and settling well into her new environment, I smiled and nodded. Of course, have fun. Just don't stay out too late. Okay. April's face lit up, her smile bursting with joy. She waved her now completely healed hands and bounced up the stairs to the second floor with a spring in her step.